All right, let's dive into one of the most powerful yet kind of invisible forces in our entire global economy. We're talking about an industry that literally moves mountains every single day. And honestly, without it, our modern world just wouldn't work.
So to get us started, here's a simple question for you. Picture a hot, fresh pizza and the oven that baked it. I mean, what could those two things possibly have in common? Well, the answer is way, way bigger than you might think.
See, the connection is all about their most basic ingredients. You've got the grain that became the dough, the iron ore that was turned into the oven steel, and heck, even the coal that was burned to create the power to cook the thing. All of those raw materials had to come from somewhere, right? And that journey happens in a very specific way. They all travel completely unpackaged in these enormous quantities as bulk cargo. This is that hidden world that supports pretty much everything, from the food we eat to the buildings we live in.
So what is it exactly? Well, to put it simply, bulk cargo is any stuff that's just loaded directly into a ship's hold with zero packaging. We're talking giant piles of grain, or coal, or gravel, or even liquids like crude oil.
So how does this whole hidden world actually work? First, we're going to try to get a handle on the unbelievable scale of these unpackaged goods. Then we'll look at the two different sides of bulk cargo. We're talking dry versus wet. After that, we'll uncover some of the really surprising and sometimes deadly dangers that are hiding inside them. And finally, we'll see how the industry manages all these risks and what it actually costs to move mountains across the ocean. Okay, first up, let's just try to wrap our heads around the massive size of this operation. I mean, this is a system that works on a truly planetary scale. Get this, over 80% of all international trade travels by sea. And a huge, huge chunk of that is bulk cargo. It's basically the lifeblood of global industry, moving raw materials from where they're dug up to where they're turned into, well, everything. Now, if you zoom in on just the dry bulk world, the market is really dominated by what the industry calls the major bulks. Things like iron ore, coal, and grain, they make up a whopping 2/3 of all of it. That last third, the so-called minor bulks, is a mix of everything else you can think of. Cement, fertilizers, scrap metal, you name it.
And here's where it gets really fascinating. The cost of shipping all these raw materials is such a powerful signal that it basically gives us a peek into the health of the entire global economy. It's tracked by this thing called the Baltic Dry Index, or BDI. When that index is high, it means demand for materials is booming and the economy is growing. But when it's low, that can be a really early warning sign that things are slowing down.
Okay, so you've got all this stuff crisscrossing the globe, but it's not all the same. It's really split into two totally different worlds, and each one has its own set of challenges. You've got dry and you've got wet. So on one side, you have your dry bulk, solid stuff like grain or ore that's just piled into a cargo hold. And on the other, you've got liquid bulk, things like oil or chemicals that have to be pumped into these specialized tankers. And as you can probably guess, the risks are totally different. With dry bulk, you're worried about the cargo getting damaged. With liquid bulk, the absolute nightmare is a spill or a leak. Now, you'd think moving a giant pile of stuff from point A to point B would be pretty straightforward, right? Well, you'd be wrong. This is where things get really interesting and kind of scary. The laws of physics can turn these simple materials into incredibly lethal hazards. I mean, really think about this for a second. How can something as ordinary as a huge pile of grain actually flip over and sink a giant steel ship that weighs thousands and thousands of tons? The answer is just terrifyingly simple. Like this quote says, most grains start to shift if the ship rolls more than about 20 degrees. And when that much weight suddenly slides to one side, the ship starts to list. That list then makes the next roll even worse, which causes more cargo to shift, and it becomes this catastrophic chain reaction that can just flip the whole vessel. The science behind this is a principle called the angle of repose. It's basically the steepest angle a material can be piled at before it starts to slide. So something like iron ore makes a nice, steep, stable cone. But a lot of grains have a really low angle, which means they act almost like a liquid and can start shifting at the drop of a hat. But it's not just about shifting. No, some cargoes have an even nastier trick up their sleeve. Certain things like iron ore or copper ore can suddenly change from a solid into a thick, totally unstable liquid slurry. This process is called liquefaction. It happens when there's too much moisture in the cargo. The constant vibrations from the ship at sea cause the water to separate out, creating this free-flowing sludge at the bottom of the hold.
This creates what's called a free surface effect, and it can wipe out a ship's stability in an instant. It's often fatal. And the list of these hidden dangers just goes on and on. Coal can literally catch fire by itself or release explosive gas. A hold full of wood chips can suck all the oxygen out of the air, turning it into a death trap. Even a pile of scrap metal can have fire and radioactivity risks. Crazy, right? Okay, so with all these dangers lurking inside these materials, how in the world does the industry manage to safely move trillions of dollars worth of this stuff? Well, it all comes down to incredibly strict planning and procedure.
To stop disasters before they start, the industry follows a super strict 5-step safety playbook. Think of it like a chain of responsibility. It all starts with classification. You have to know exactly what the cargo's risks are before it gets anywhere near a ship. That knowledge then feeds into meticulous planning and all the required documentation. Then, of course, you got to pick the right vessel for the job. But the last step, and you could argue it's the most important, is communication. That constant chatter between the shipper, the carrier, and the port is the glue that holds the entire safety chain together.
And finally, let's talk money. I mean, how do you even put a price tag on moving a literal mountain of iron ore from one continent to another?
Well, it pretty much boils down to 3 main things. First, the obvious one, weight and size. The more you've got, the more it costs. Simple. Second is something called freight class. It's an industry rating based on how dense a cargo is and how easy it is to handle. A trickier material gets a higher class, and that means it costs more to move. And last but not least is distance. The farther it's got to go, the more you're going to pay in fuel and time.
So when you put it all together, you realize that bulk cargo is so much more than just stuff on a ship. It is an incredibly complex, highly regulated, and sometimes dangerous system that is the invisible engine for almost everything we build, everything we eat, and everything we use. So the next time you look at a skyscraper, or a car, or even just a slice of pizza, maybe you'll see it a little differently. Maybe you'll wonder about the giant ships, the hidden dangers, and the epic, invisible journey its raw ingredients took across the ocean just to get to you. Thanks for watching.